The wagon wheel hit a rut in the hard, packed earth, and Helena Emerson felt rough hands shove hard against her shoulders, sending her tumbling backward into emptiness before she could even scream. She hit the ground with brutal force, her body rolling across the dirt road like a discarded rag doll. Pain exploded through her ribs, her hip, her shoulder. Dust filled her mouth and nose as she came to a stop face down in the middle of the trail, the taste of blood sharp on her tongue. Through the ringing in her ears, she heard the wagon wheels creaking as they continued forward without pause, carrying her husband of 3 years away from her broken body without so much as a backward glance. Helena lay there for long minutes, unable to move, unable to fully comprehend what had just happened. The August sun of 1873 beat down mercilessly on the Texas plains, and she could feel its heat penetrating through her torn dress, baking the exposed skin of her arms and neck. Slowly, carefully, she pushed herself to her hands and knees, gasping at the sharp pain that lanced through her side. Nothing felt broken, but everything hurt. Bruises were already forming across her body, and when she touched her forehead, her fingers came away red with blood. She looked up the road where the wagon had disappeared, a cloud of dust still hanging in the air marking its passage. Thomas had pushed her out. Her own husband had deliberately thrown her from a moving wagon in the middle of nowhere, miles from the nearest town. She had known their marriage was unhappy, had felt the coldness between them grow with each passing month, but this was attempted murder. Helena forced herself to stand, swaying on unsteady legs. Her carpetbag lay a few yards away where it had fallen, and she staggered toward it, grateful that at least she had something. When she had climbed into the wagon that morning in Amarillo, Texas, she had been holding it on her lap, planning to do some mending during the long journey to visit Thomas's brother in New Mexico territory. That bag now contained everything she owned in the world. The road stretched empty in both directions, nothing but dry grass and scattered mesquite trees as far as she could see. They had been traveling for hours, and she had no idea how far they were from Amarillo or any other settlement. The sun was past its peak, but still high enough that she had hours of daylight left, hours of brutal heat to endure. She could try to walk back the way they had come, but that was at least 15 miles, possibly more. She would never make it in this heat without water. Her hands were shaking as she opened the carpetbag, praying that the canteen she had packed that morning was still inside. Her fingers closed around the metal container, and she nearly wept with relief. She allowed herself one small sip, knowing she needed to ration it carefully. There was also a shawl, the mending she had planned to work on, an extra petticoat, and the small leather purse containing the $20 she had saved in secret over the past 2 years. Money Thomas had not known about. Helena looked down at herself. Her dress was torn at the shoulder and covered in dust and blood. Her hands were scraped raw, and she could feel a dozen other injuries making themselves known. But she was alive. Thomas had tried to kill her, but she was alive. The sound of hoofbeats made her head snap up, her heart suddenly pounding with fear. Was Thomas coming back to finish what he had started? She looked wildly around for somewhere to hide, but there was nothing, just open prairie on both sides of the road. The rider came into view from the direction of Amarillo, a single man on a dark horse, and Helena stood frozen, uncertain whether to run or stay. As the rider drew closer, she could see he was a tall man wearing a dusty brown hat, a dark vest over a faded blue shirt, and worn leather chaps. A cowboy, most likely working one of the many ranches that dotted this part of Texas. He slowed his horse as he approached, his eyes taking in her disheveled appearance, the blood on her face, the way she swayed on her feet. He pulled his horse to a stop a respectful distance away and removed his hat, revealing dark hair and a sun-weathered face that might have been anywhere from 30 to 40 years old. His eyes were a striking gray, and they were filled with concern as he looked at her. "Madam," he said, his voice deep and careful, "are you hurt? What happened here?" Helena opened her mouth to speak, but suddenly the heat and the pain and the shock of what had happened overwhelmed her. Her knees buckled and she felt herself falling. The cowboy moved faster than she would have thought possible, dismounting and reaching her side before she hit the ground. Strong arms caught her, steadying her, and she found herself looking up into those gray eyes. "Easy now," he said gently. "I've got you. You're safe. Safe." The word seemed almost foreign to her. She had not been safe in a very long time. "My husband," she managed to say, her voice hoarse. "He pushed me out of the wagon." The cowboy's expression darkened and his jaw tightened. "He did this to you." She nodded, and he muttered something under his breath that she did not quite catch, though his tone made his opinion of such a man abundantly clear. "Where is he now?" the cowboy asked, his eyes scanning the empty road. "Gone," Helena said. "He just kept going toward New Mexico territory." The cowboy was silent for a moment, still supporting her weight with one arm while his other hand reached for the canteen attached to his saddle. "Here," he said, offering it to her. "Drink. You need water." "I have some," she said weakly, gesturing toward her carpetbag. "Save yours." "I've got plenty." His voice left no room for argument, and Helena found herself taking the canteen and drinking gratefully. The water was warm but tasted like salvation. "Thank you," she said when she had finished. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be trouble." "Trouble?" He looked at her incredulously. "Madam, begging your pardon, but you're the one who's been wronged here. My name is Quinn Dalton. I work at the Circle J Ranch about 10 miles west of Amarillo. I was heading out to check on some strays when I saw you." "Helena Emerson," she said, and then corrected herself bitterly. "Helena Edwards, though I hardly think I can claim that name anymore." Quinn's expression was grave as he studied her injuries. "Mrs. Edwards, you need a doctor. That cut on your head needs tending and you might have injuries I cannot see. The question is what you want to do. I can take you back to Amarillo, to the doctor there and the sheriff if you want to press charges against your husband. Or," he paused, seeming to choose his words carefully, "if you want to get away from here, away from him, I can help with that too." Helena stared at him, surprised by his offer. "You don't even know me." "I know enough," Quinn said firmly. "I know a man who would throw his wife from a moving wagon is the kind of man who would come back looking for her, and probably not with good intentions. I know you're hurt and alone on a dangerous road. And I know I was raised to help people in need, especially women who have been wronged by sorry excuses for men." Something in his voice, in the genuine anger and concern in his eyes, made Helena believe him. She thought about going back to Amarillo, about trying to explain to the sheriff what Thomas had done. But Thomas was well liked in town, a successful merchant with friends in high places. Who would believe her word against his? He would claim she had fallen, that it was an accident, that she was hysterical. And then what? She had no family in Amarillo, no one to take her in. She would be a woman alone, accused of lying about her husband with nowhere to go. "I want to get away," she said quietly. "As far away as possible." Quinn nodded as if he had expected this answer. "All right then. Can you ride?" "Yes," Helena said. "My father taught me when I was young." "Good. My horse can carry us both for now, and we'll head to the Circle J. The ranch owner, Mrs. Jameson, she is a good woman. Lost her husband 5 years back and has been running the place herself ever since. She'll give you a safe place to rest and heal up, and we can figure out what comes next from there. Sound fair?" Helena felt tears prick at her eyes, overwhelmed by this stranger's kindness. Why are you helping me?" Quinn's expression softened. "Because it's the right thing to do, Mrs. Edwards, and because no woman deserves what was done to you today." He helped her gather her carpetbag, then assisted her onto his horse before mounting behind her. His arm came around her waist to hold the reins, steady and secure but respectful. Helena leaned back slightly, suddenly exhausted, and felt him shift to support her weight more fully. "You just rest now," Quinn said quietly as he turned his horse west, away from Amarillo, away from Thomas, away from the life she had known. "We'll take it slow and easy. You're safe now, I promise you that." As they rode across the Texas plains, Helena found herself believing him. For the first time in 3 years, since the day she had married Thomas Edwards and discovered too late what kind of man he truly was, she felt the faintest stirring of hope. She did not know what lay ahead, did not know what she would do or where she would go. But she was alive, and she was moving away from the man who had tried to kill her, and that was enough for now. Sun was lower in the sky when they finally reached the Circle J Ranch. It was larger than Helena had expected, with a sprawling ranch house, a big barn, several outbuildings, and a network of corrals where horses grazed peacefully. As they rode up, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 50, with gray-streaked brown hair pulled back in a practical bun and sharp blue eyes that missed nothing. "Quinn," she called out, then stopped when she saw Helena. "What's happened?" Quinn dismounted and carefully helped Helena down, keeping a steadying hand on her arm. "Mrs. Jameson, this is Mrs. Helena Edwards. I found her on the Amarillo Road. Her husband threw her out of their wagon and left her there to die." Mrs. Jameson's face hardened, and she hurried forward, taking in Helena's injuries with practiced eyes. "Good Lord. Come inside, child. Let's get you cleaned up and tended to. Quinn, fetch some water from the well, clean water, mind you." "Yes, madam," Quinn said, and Helena heard the respect in his voice. Mrs. Jameson guided Helena into the house, into a spacious kitchen that smelled of bread and herbs. She settled Helena into a chair at the large wooden table and began gently examining her injuries. "Nothing broken, I think," Mrs. Jameson said after a careful inspection. "But you'll be black and blue for days, and this cut on your head needs cleaning. You're lucky, Mrs. Edwards. A fall like that could easily have killed you." "I don't think luck had much to do with it," Helena said quietly. "And please call me Helena." Mrs. Jameson's eyes met hers, understanding passing between them. "Well then, Helena, you call me Margaret. And you're welcome to stay here as long as you need. I won't have a woman turned out when she needs help." Quinn returned with the water, and Margaret set about cleaning Helena's wounds with gentle efficiency. Helena winced at the sting of the cloth against her scraped skin, but did not complain. It felt good in a strange way to have someone care for her injuries, to be treated with kindness. "Quinn tells me your husband was heading toward New Mexico territory," Margaret said as she worked. "Is he likely to come back looking for you?" Helena thought about this. "I don't know. I don't think so. I think he meant for me to die out there. If he believes I did, he'll just continue on without me. And if he finds out you're alive, then I don't know what he'll do," Helena admitted. "Thomas is not a man who likes to be defied or to have his plans go wrong." Margaret exchanged a look with Quinn, who stood leaning against the doorframe, his arms crossed. "Then we'll need to be careful," Margaret said. "If anyone comes around asking about you, we'll say we haven't seen you. And Helena, you should know that you're safe here. Quinn and the other ranch hands, they're good men. They'll protect you if it comes to that." "I don't want to bring trouble to your door," Helena protested. "Nonsense," Margaret said firmly. "The trouble is not of your making. The trouble is with a man who would harm his own wife. Now you look exhausted, and I imagine you're hungry too. When did you last eat? Helena tried to remember. Breakfast, early this morning in Amarillo. That settles it. Quinn, go tell the men there'll be an extra person for supper. Helena, once I've finished here, I'll show you to a room where you can rest. Tomorrow we'll talk about what comes next, but tonight you just need to heal and feel safe. Tears spilled down Helena's cheeks before she could stop them, and Margaret made a sympathetic sound, pulling her into a gentle embrace that minded her injuries. There now. You cry if you need to. Lord knows you've earned the right. Helena cried then, really cried for the first time since Thomas had pushed her from the wagon. She cried for the life she had lost, for the man she had thought Thomas was when she married him, for the fear and pain she had endured. And Margaret held her through it all, this stranger who had shown her more kindness in an hour than Thomas had shown her in 3 years. When the tears finally subsided, Helena pulled back, embarrassed. "I'm sorry. Don't you dare apologize," Margaret said firmly. "You've been through something terrible. You're allowed to feel it." Quinn had slipped away during her crying, giving her privacy, but he returned now with a glass of water. "Supper will be ready in about an hour," he said quietly. "The men know we have a guest." "Thank you, Quinn," Margaret said. "Now, let me show Helena to a room." The room Margaret led her to was small but clean, with a real bed covered in a colorful quilt, a washstand with a basin and pitcher, and a window that looked out over the prairie. It was simple, but to Helena it looked like luxury. "This was my daughter's room," Margaret said softly. "Before she married and moved to Fort Worth, I think she'd be happy to know someone was using it who needed it." "It's wonderful," Helena said sincerely. "Thank you, Margaret. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." "You don't need to repay anything. You just focus on healing and figuring out what you want to do next. Now rest a bit if you can. I'll come get you when supper is ready." After Margaret left, Helena sank down onto the bed, her body aching. She looked down at her torn, dirty dress and felt suddenly disconnected from herself. Just this morning she had been Helena Edwards, unhappily married but still going through the motions of being a wife. Now she was something else entirely. A woman alone. A woman whose husband had tried to kill her. A woman who had been saved by the kindness of strangers. She thought about Quinn Dalton, about the way he had looked at her with such genuine concern, about how careful and respectful he had been even as he helped her. She thought about the anger that had flashed in his gray eyes when she told him what Thomas had done. Something about him made her feel safe, and after 3 years of feeling anything but safe, that was a precious gift. A soft knock at the door roused her from her thoughts. "Yes." "It's me," Margaret's voice came. "I brought you some clean clothes. They were my daughter's, but I think they'll fit you well enough, and some water for washing." Helena opened the door, and Margaret came in with an armful of fabric and a pitcher of warm water. "Thank you," Helena said again, feeling like she could not say it enough. "The men will be gathering for supper soon," Margaret said. "There are 5 ranch hands besides Quinn, and they're good men, but I know it might feel overwhelming. If you'd rather eat in here tonight, I'll bring you a plate." Helena considered this. Part of her wanted to hide to avoid facing anyone else, but another part, the part that had survived Thomas's cruelty, knew she could not hide forever. "I'll come down," she said, "if that's all right." "Of course it's all right. This is your home for as long as you need it to be." Margaret smiled warmly and left her to wash and change. The dress Margaret had brought was a simple blue calico, well worn but clean and mended. It fit reasonably well, though it was slightly loose in the waist. Helena washed as best she could, cleaning away the dust and blood, wincing at each new bruise she discovered. When she looked in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized herself. Her face was pale beneath the bruises, the cut on her forehead stark and red. but her eyes were different somehow, harder perhaps, or maybe just more aware. She made her way downstairs, following the sound of male voices and the smell of cooking food. The dining room was large, with a long table that could easily seat a dozen people. 5 men were already seated, and they fell silent when she entered, all of them rising to their feet in polite greeting. "Gentlemen, this is Mrs. Helena Edwards," Margaret said from the doorway to the kitchen. "She'll be staying with us for a time. Helena, these are my ranch hands. That's Cole, Pete, Sam, Billy, and you've already met Quinn." The men nodded politely, their faces showing curiosity but also respect. They were a varied group, ranging from a young man who could not have been much past 20 to a grizzled man with gray in his beard who was probably in his 50s. Quinn was seated at the far end of the table, and he stood as well, pulling out the empty chair beside him. "Madam," he said simply, and Helena moved to take the offered seat, grateful for his quiet support. Supper was a simple affair of beef stew, fresh bread, and strong coffee, but to Helena it tasted better than any meal she could remember. The men were initially quiet, clearly aware of her injuries and unsure how to act around her, but Margaret kept the conversation flowing, asking about the day's work, discussing plans for the coming week, treating Helena's presence as perfectly natural. Gradually, the men relaxed, and Helena found herself relaxing too. These were working men, weathered by sun and hard labor, but there was a fundamental decency about them that she recognized. They treated her with respect, never staring at her injuries, including her in the conversation without pressing her for details she did not want to share. Quinn, she noticed, was quiet during the meal, but his eyes often drifted to her, checking to make sure she was all right. There was something protective in his gaze, something that warmed her even as it made her nervous. She did not know this man, did not know why he had chosen to help her, but she was grateful beyond words that he had been on that road today. After supper, the men drifted outside to smoke and check on the horses before bed. Margaret shooed Helena away from helping with the dishes, insisting she needed rest, so Helena found herself outside on the porch, breathing in the cool evening air. The sun had set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold, and the prairie stretched out endlessly before her. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Quinn approaching, his hat in his hands. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. "Of course not. It's your home." He leaned against the porch railing beside her, looking out at the sunset. "I wanted to make sure you were all right. I know it must have been strange, sitting down to supper with a bunch of cowboys you don't know." "It was kind," Helena corrected. "Everyone has been very kind to me." "Especially you, Quinn. You saved my life today." He shook his head. "I just did what anyone would do." "No," Helena said firmly. "Not anyone. Plenty of people would have ridden right past me, not wanting to get involved. You stopped. You helped. You brought me somewhere safe." "That's not something I'll ever forget." Quinn was quiet for a moment, then said, "Can I ask you something? And you don't have to answer if you don't want to, all right. What kind of man does that? Throws his wife out of a wagon in the middle of nowhere?" Helena's hands tightened on the porch railing. "A man who never wanted a wife in the first place. A man who only married me for my father's money and connections. My father died 6 months after the wedding, and Thomas got nothing because my father had seen through him by then and changed his will. After that, Thomas just saw me as a burden, another mouth to feed with no benefit to him." "That's no excuse," Quinn said, anger evident in his voice. "No," Helena agreed. "It's not, but it's the reason. This morning, Thomas told me he wanted to start fresh in New Mexico territory, that he wanted to go alone. I thought he meant he was going to leave me in Amarillo. I had no idea he planned to just throw me away like trash." "You're not trash," Quinn said intensely. turning to face her. "You're a person, a human being who deserved to be treated with respect and care. What he did was evil, plain and simple." The conviction in his voice made Helena's throat tight. "Thank you for saying that." They stood in silence for a while, watching the last light fade from the sky. Helena found herself acutely aware of Quinn's presence beside her, of the strength and steadiness he seemed to radiate. She had not felt safe around a man in so long, had learned to be wary and careful, but somehow with Quinn she felt different. "What will you do now?" Quinn asked quietly. "Do you have family somewhere? People who would take you in?" "No," Helena said. "My mother died when I was 12 and my father died, as I said, 6 months after my wedding. I have a cousin in Missouri, but we haven't spoken in years. She didn't approve of my marriage to Thomas." Helena laughed bitterly. "Turns out she was right." "You're welcome here," Quinn said. "Margaret meant what she said. You can stay as long as you need to." "I can't stay forever," Helena said. "I need to find work to support myself somehow. I have a little money saved, but it won't last long." "Margaret could probably use help around the house," Quinn suggested. "She does everything herself now, and the place is big. If you wanted to stay and work, I'm sure she'd welcome it." Helena considered this. "Do you think she would? I don't want charity, but I can cook and clean and sew. I could earn my keep." "I think she'd be glad of the company as much as the help," Quinn said. "But we can talk to her about it tomorrow. Tonight you should just rest." "Quinn," Helena said as he turned to go back inside, "why did you really help me today? The truth." He paused, his hand on the door frame, and was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft but clear. "Because 5 years ago my sister wrote me a letter. She was married to a man who hurt her and she was afraid, but she didn't know how to get away. She asked me to come help her, but I was in the middle of a cattle drive, and I wrote back saying I would come as soon as I could. By the time I got there, she was dead. He said she fell down the stairs, and everyone believed him because she had been clumsy lately, jumping at shadows, always nervous. But I knew what he had done to her." Helena's heart broke for him. "Quinn, I'm so sorry. I swore that day that I would never ignore someone in need again, that if I ever had the chance to help someone the way I should have helped my sister, I would take it, no questions asked. So when I saw you today, hurt and alone, there was never any question in my mind about what I would do." Helena stepped closer to him, and before she could second-guess herself, she reached out and took his hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "For your sister and for me, thank you." Quinn's fingers closed around hers, warm and strong. "You're welcome, Helena, and I promise, as long as you're here, no one will hurt you again. You have my word on that." She believed him. Looking into his gray eyes, seeing the determination and sincerity there, she believed him completely. "Good night, Quinn," she said softly. "Good night, Helena." She went inside and up to her borrowed room, her hand still tingling from where he had held it. As she lay down on the soft bed, her body aching but her spirit somehow lighter than it had been in years, she thought about the strange turn her life had taken. This morning she had been trapped in a nightmare marriage, and tonight she was free. Bruised and uncertain about the future, but free. And there was Quinn Dalton, with his gray eyes and his quiet strength, who had saved her for reasons that broke her heart even as they made her trust him. She barely knew him, but already she felt a connection, a sense that he understood her in a way no one else did. It was too soon for such feelings, far too soon after escaping her marriage, but she could not deny what she felt. As sleep finally claimed her, Helena's last thought was that perhaps, just perhaps, she had not been pushed from that wagon to die. Perhaps she had been pushed toward something new, something better. Perhaps this was not an ending at all, but a beginning. The next morning, Helena woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the sound of roosters crowing. For a moment she was disoriented. not recognizing where she was, and then memory flooded back. She sat up carefully, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles and the ache of her bruises. Everything hurt even more than it had yesterday, but she was alive and safe, and that was what mattered. She washed and dressed in another of the dresses Margaret had given her, this one a practical brown cotton that was perfect for work. When she made her way downstairs, she found Margaret already in the kitchen, preparing breakfast. "Good morning," Margaret said with a warm smile. "How did you sleep?" "Better than I have in a long time," Helena admitted. "Thank you again for everything, Margaret. I was hoping we could talk about me staying on and working for you. Quinn mentioned you might need help around the house." Margaret's smile widened. "Did he now?" "Well, Quinn is a perceptive man. I have been finding it harder to keep up with everything since my daughter left. If you're willing to help with the cooking and cleaning and general household tasks, I would be more than happy to have you. I can pay you a fair wage, and of course room and board are included." "That's more than generous," Helena said, relief flooding through her. "I'll work hard, I promise you that." "I don't doubt it for a moment. Now let's get breakfast on the table. The men will be in soon, hungry as wolves." They worked together in comfortable silence, and Helena found herself enjoying the simple tasks of setting the table and slicing bread. There was something healing about domestic work when it was done by choice rather than obligation, when it was appreciated rather than expected. The men filed in for breakfast, greeting Helena politely and settling into the easy routine of a shared meal. Quinn took the same seat he had occupied the night before, next to her, and as they ate, he told Margaret about a fence that needed mending in the north pasture and some horses that needed to be moved to better grazing. After breakfast, the men headed out to their work, and Helena insisted on cleaning up despite Margaret's protests. "You're healing," Margaret said. "You don't need to overdo it." "I need to feel useful," Helena countered. "Please let me help." They fell into a partnership that felt natural, working side by side to clean the kitchen, and then moving on to other tasks around the house. Margaret was easy to talk to, sharing stories about her late husband and her daughter, asking Helena about her life before Thomas without pressing for painful details. Over the next few days, a routine developed. Helena worked alongside Margaret during the day, learning the rhythms of the ranch household. She cooked and cleaned, mended clothes, tended the kitchen garden, and helped with the countless tasks that went into running a ranch. Her body healed slowly, the bruises fading from purple to green to yellow, the cut on her head closing and beginning to scar. And every day she saw Quinn. He would come in for meals, would sometimes stop by the house during the day for water or to report something to Margaret, would sit on the porch in the evenings after work was done. They talked, cautiously at first and then more easily, sharing stories about their lives, their hopes, their fears. Helena learned that Quinn was 32 years old, had been working as a cowboy since he was 16, and had come to the Circle J 3 years ago after his sister's death. He was quiet and thoughtful, slow to anger but fiercely loyal to those he cared about. He loved horses, could play the harmonica, and had a dry sense of humor that made her laugh when she least expected it. Quinn learned that Helena was 24, had grown up in St. Louis, loved to read but rarely had access to books, and had a beautiful singing voice that she rarely used anymore. She had married Thomas when she was 21, believing his lies about love and devotion, and had spent 3 years learning that she had made a terrible mistake. As the weeks passed, Helena felt herself changing. The fear that had been her constant companion for 3 years began to ease. She started to smile more, to laugh at the jokes the ranch hands told at supper, to feel like a person rather than just a thing to be used or discarded. And she found herself thinking about Quinn more and more, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, the gentleness of his hands with the horses, the sound of his voice when he said her name. One evening about a month after Helena had arrived at the Circle J, she was sitting on the porch mending one of Quinn's shirts when he came to join her. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, and the air was finally cooling after another hot September day. "You don't have to do that," Quinn said, nodding at the shirt in her hands. "I can mend my own clothes." "I know," Helena said, "but I wanted to. Besides, your stitching is terrible. This shirt would have fallen apart in another week." Quinn laughed, a sound that made her heart lift. "Fair enough. I never did have much skill with a needle." He sat down beside her, and they fell into their customary comfortable silence, watching the sunset. After a while, Quinn said, "Helena, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you think about going back? To Amarillo, I mean. To try to find out what happened to your husband, to see if you're legally free of him." Helena's hands stilled on the mending. She had thought about this, late at night when she could not sleep. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to know if he thinks I'm dead, if he even cares what happened to me. But another part of me doesn't want to know. If I go back, if I make myself known, then I have to deal with him again. I would have to see him, maybe even talk to him. And I don't think I'm strong enough for that yet." "You're stronger than you think," Quinn said quietly, "but I understand. I just want to make sure you know that whatever you decide, we'll support you. Margaret and me and the others were on your side." "Why?" Helena asked, the question that had been on her mind for weeks finally coming out. "Why have you all been so kind to me? I'm nobody, just a woman who was in the wrong place at the wrong time." Quinn turned to face her fully, his expression serious. "You're not nobody, Helena. You're someone who survived something terrible, someone who kept going when it would have been easier to give up, someone who works hard and treats people with kindness even after being treated with cruelty. That makes you somebody worth caring about." Helena's eyes filled with tears, and she set aside the mending before she stained it. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything." Quinn reached out and gently took her hand, the way he had that first night. "I just want you to know that you have a place here for as long as you want it, and that you're valued, Helena. By Margaret, by the men, by me, especially by me." Helena's breath caught at the intensity in his eyes. "Quinn, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "I know you need time to heal, to figure out who you are outside of that marriage. I'm not asking for anything, Helena. I just want you to know how I feel. I care about you. More than I probably should, given that we've only known each other a month. But I can't help it. From the moment I saw you on that road, something in me knew you were special." Helena's heart was pounding. She knew she should be cautious, should protect herself, should not jump from one man to another. But Quinn was nothing like Thomas. Quinn was kind and patient and good. Quinn had saved her life and asked for nothing in return. "I care about you too," she whispered, "but I'm afraid. I'm afraid of making another mistake, of trusting the wrong person again." "I understand," Quinn said, and she could see that he meant it. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." They sat together as the last light faded from the sky, hands intertwined, not speaking but saying everything that needed to be said. Helena felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a feeling she had not experienced in so long she had almost forgotten what it was. Hope. Joy. The possibility of something good. Over the following months, Helena and Quinn's relationship deepened slowly, carefully. They spent evenings talking on the porch, took walks together around the ranch when work permitted, sat beside each other at meals. Quinn never pushed, never demanded more than she was ready to give. He was patient and gentle, letting her set the pace, letting her learn to trust again. Helena bloomed under this treatment. She laughed more easily, sang while she worked, threw herself into her tasks with enthusiasm. Margaret watched with approval, occasionally making comments about what a good match she thought Helena and Quinn would make, and the other ranch hands teased Quinn good-naturedly about being sweet on the boss's helper. Winter came to the Texas plains, bringing cooler temperatures and occasional rain. Helena settled into her life at the Circle J as if she had always been there. She had not heard anything from or about Thomas, and she tried not to think about him, tried not to wonder if he had made it to New Mexico territory or if something had happened to him along the way. He was part of her past, and she was determined to focus on her present and future. One cold December evening, Helena and Quinn were sitting in the parlor after supper. Margaret had retired early with a headache, and the other men had gone to their bunkhouse, leaving the two of them alone. A fire crackled in the fireplace, casting warm light around the room, and Helena was working on embroidering a pillowcase while Quinn whittled a piece of wood into the shape of a horse. "Christmas is coming," Quinn said suddenly. "Margaret usually has the whole crew over for a big dinner. Will you help her with it this year?" "Of course," Helena said. "I'd be happy to. What does she usually make?" As Quinn described the traditional feast, Helena found herself imagining the celebration, the joy of the season, the feeling of being part of a family. It had been so long since she had felt that way, so long since she had looked forward to anything. "Quinn," she said, interrupting his description of Margaret's famous apple pie, "I need to tell you something." He set down his whittling, giving her his full attention. "What is it?" "I've been thinking about what you said, about how you care about me, and I want you to know that I feel the same way. I think I have for a while now, but I was too afraid to admit it, even to myself." Quinn's face lit up, and he moved from his chair to kneel beside hers. "Helena, let me finish," she said gently. "I do care about you, Quinn, more than care if I'm honest, but there's still the matter of Thomas. I'm still legally married to him, even though I don't know where he is or if he's even alive. I can't give myself to you fully, not until I know I'm truly free." Quinn took her hand, his expression understanding. "I know, and I've been thinking about that too. After the holidays, when the weather clears, we could go to Amarillo, talk to a lawyer, find out what your options are. Maybe we can get you a divorce on grounds of abandonment and attempted murder. Or maybe we'll find out that Thomas died somewhere between here and New Mexico territory, and you're already a widow." The practical way he spoke about it made Helena feel better. "You would come with me." "Every step of the way," Quinn promised. "Whatever you need to do to be free of him, I'll help you do it. And then, if you'll have me, I would like to court you properly. I would like to see if what we have is as real and good as I think it is." "I know it is," Helena said softly. "I knew it months ago, Quinn. You're nothing like Thomas. You're everything I thought a good man should be, everything I hoped for when I was young and stupid enough to believe in romance." "You weren't stupid," Quinn said firmly. "You were trusting, and he took advantage of that. But I promise you, Helena, I will never take advantage of you. I will never hurt you. I will spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of your trust." Helena set aside her embroidery and cupped his face in her hands. "You've already proven it, Quinn. Every day, in 100 small ways, you've shown me who you are, and I love who you are." The words hung in the air between them, significant and true. Quinn's eyes widened, and then he smiled, a brilliant, joyous smile that transformed his usually serious face. "You love me." "I do," Helena said, realizing as she said it how completely true it was. "I love you, Quinn Dalton." "I love you too," Quinn said, his voice rough with emotion. "I have loved you since the day I found you on that road, bloody and brave and refusing to give up. I will love you for the rest of my life, Helena." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted to, but Helena did not want to pull away. She closed the distance between them, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. Quinn's arms came around her, holding her carefully, as if she were something precious and fragile. The kiss deepened, and Helena felt all the fear and pain of the past few years melting away, replaced by warmth and joy and the absolute certainty that this was right. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard, and Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I want to marry you," he said. "When you're free, when it's legal and right, I want to make you my wife, if you'll have me." "Yes," Helena said without hesitation. "Yes, Quinn, I'll marry you. When I'm free, when we've dealt with Thomas and the past, I'll marry you and be proud to be your wife." They sat together by the fire, wrapped in each other's arms, making quiet plans for the future. They would go to Amarillo after the new year, would sort out the legal complications of Helena's marriage to Thomas, would start their life together properly. It would not be easy, but they would face it together, and that made all the difference. Christmas at the Circle J was everything Helena had hoped for. The house was filled with laughter and warmth, the table groaning under the weight of roasted turkey, ham, potatoes, vegetables, pies, and cakes. All the ranch hands joined them, along with a few neighboring ranchers and their families, and the celebration lasted well into the evening. Helena sang carols with the others, her voice clear and strong, and she caught Quinn watching her with such love in his eyes that she felt her heart might burst with happiness. When the new year came, bringing with it 1874 and all its possibilities, Helena felt ready to face whatever came next. She and Quinn had told Margaret about their plans to go to Amarillo, and the older woman had been delighted, hugging them both and declaring that it was about time they made things official. In mid-January, when the weather had cleared and the roads were passable, Helena and Quinn set out for Amarillo. It was strange for Helena to retrace the journey that had brought her to the Circle J, to ride past the spot where Thomas had thrown her from the wagon. But this time she was not alone and injured. This time she was strong and loved, riding beside a good man who would never hurt her. Amarillo had not changed much in the 5 months since she had left. The streets were still dusty, the buildings still weathered, the people still going about their business. But Helena was different. She rode into town with her head held high, no longer the cowed and frightened woman she had been. Their first stop was the lawyer's office. Mr. Hutchinson was a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner. He listened carefully as Helena explained her situation, his expression growing progressively grimmer. "Mrs. Edwards," he said when she had finished, "what you've described is a clear case of attempted murder and abandonment. There's no question that you have grounds for divorce. However, there is one complication. We need to establish where your husband is and serve him with divorce papers." "Have you heard anything from him or about him since the incident?" "Nothing," Helena said. "I don't know if he made it to New Mexico territory or if something happened to him along the way." Mr. Hutchinson tapped his pen thoughtfully. "I can make some inquiries. If he did make it to New Mexico territory, we may be able to track him down through business records or land claims. If he didn't, if something happened to him on the journey, well, that would simplify matters considerably, though I don't say that lightly." "How long will it take to find out?" Quinn asked. "Could be weeks, could be months," Mr. Hutchinson said honestly. "These things take time, especially when we're dealing with someone who's left the state, but I'll start the process immediately. In the meantime, Mrs. Edwards, I'll need you to sign some documents, and I'll need a statement about what happened that day on the road." Helena spent the next hour giving her statement, writing out every detail of Thomas's attack, of being left for dead, of Quinn finding her. It was painful to relive, but also cathartic in a way. She was no longer hiding what had happened, no longer ashamed or afraid. When they left the lawyer's office, Quinn squeezed her hand. "You did well," he said. "That took courage." "I had you with me," Helena said simply. "That made it easier." Their next stop was the sheriff's office. Helena had debated whether to press charges against Thomas, but ultimately she decided she had to. What he had done was a crime, and he deserved to answer for it. The sheriff, a weathered man named Tucker, listened to her story with a scowl. "I remember you," he said when she finished. "You were Thomas Edwards's wife. He was a merchant here, did right well for himself. Are you certain about these accusations, madam? They're mighty serious." Helena felt anger kindle in her chest at the skepticism in his tone. "I am certain, Sheriff. I have the scars to prove it. My husband threw me from a moving wagon and left me to die. If Mr. Dalton had not found me, I would have died on that road." "I found her," Quinn said, his voice hard. "I can testify to her condition when I came across her. She was bleeding, bruised, clearly having been thrown violently to the ground, and her husband was nowhere to be seen." Sheriff Tucker sighed. "All right. I'll make a report, and if Edwards turns up, I'll bring him in for questioning. But without him here to give his side of the story, there's not much I can do." It was not the response Helena had hoped for, but she had not really expected much more. She filed her report and left the sheriff's office feeling drained but also strangely relieved. She had done everything she could. Now it was just a matter of waiting. They spent that night at Amarillo's small hotel, in separate rooms to preserve propriety, and headed back to the Circle J the next morning. As they rode, Helena felt lighter than she had in years. She had taken the steps necessary to free herself from Thomas legally. She had told the truth about what he had done. She had stood up for herself in a way she never had during their marriage. "Thank you for being there," she said to Quinn as they rode, "for supporting me through all of that." "There's nowhere else I would have been," Quinn said. "We're in this together, Helena, always." The weeks that followed were some of the happiest of Helena's life. She continued her work at the ranch. But now there was an added joy to everything because she knew she was building toward a future with Quinn. They were careful to maintain some propriety, aware that they were not yet married. But they spent every possible moment together, deepening their bond, learning each other's hearts. In late February, a letter arrived from Mr. Hutchinson. Helena's hands shook as she opened it, Quinn standing beside her, his hand on her shoulder for support. As she read, her eyes widened and a complex mix of emotions washed over her. "What is it?" Quinn asked gently. "Thomas is dead," Helena said, her voice numb. "According to Mr. Hutchinson's inquiries, he made it to Santa Fe but died there in October, just 2 months after he left me. A fever of some kind. He's buried in the Santa Fe cemetery." She looked up at Quinn, not sure what she felt. Relief, grief, guilt, some strange combination of all three. "I'm free," she whispered. "I'm actually free." Quinn pulled her into his arms, holding her as she processed this news. Thomas was dead. The man who had been her husband, who had tried to kill her, who had made her life miserable for 3 years, was gone. She would never have to face him again, never have to fight him in court, never have to fear him coming back for her. "How do you feel?" Quinn asked after a while. "I don't know," Helena admitted. "I'm glad I'm free, but I never wished him dead, Quinn. Even after everything he did to me, I didn't want him to die." "I know," Quinn said softly. "You're a good person, Helena, better than he deserved. But this means we can move forward now without anything hanging over us. If you still want to marry me, we can do it properly whenever you're ready." Helena pulled back to look at him. "I want to marry you, Quinn. I want to start our life together. But I think I need a little time first, to mourn the person I thought Thomas was when I married him, to make peace with everything that happened." "Take all the time you need," Quinn said. "I'll be here. waiting for as long as it takes. Over the next few weeks, Helena did grieve in her own way. She grieved for the young woman she had been at 21, full of hope and dreams, who had believed Thomas's lies. She grieved for the 3 years of her life that had been stolen by fear and unhappiness. And yes, she even grieved a little for Thomas himself, for whatever pain or brokenness in him had made him into the kind of man who could hurt his own wife. But as she grieved, she also healed. She felt the last chains of her past falling away, felt herself becoming fully her own person, free to make her own choices, to build her own future. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she wanted to build that future with Quinn. On a warm day in late March, as spring was beginning to touch the Texas plains with green, Helena and Quinn took a walk together after supper. They ended up at the top of a small rise that overlooked the ranch, the setting sun painting everything gold. "Quinn," Helena said, turning to face him. "I'm ready." He understood immediately what she meant. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure," Helena said firmly. "I've spent the last month letting go of the past, and now I'm ready to embrace the future. I love you, Quinn Dalton. I want to be your wife. I want to build a life with you, have a family with you, grow old with you, if you'll still have me." Quinn's answer was to pull her into his arms and kiss her with a passion that took her breath away. When they finally broke apart, both of them were smiling. "I'll always have you," Quinn said. "Today, tomorrow, forever. You're the best thing that ever happened to me, Helena. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making you happy." "You already make me happy," Helena said. "Every single day." They were married on a beautiful April morning in 1874, in a simple ceremony at the small church in Amarillo. Margaret stood up for Helena, and one of the ranch hands, Cole, stood up for Quinn. Helena wore a new dress that Margaret had helped her sew, made of cream-colored cotton with lace trim, and she carried wildflowers that Quinn had picked for her that morning. As Helena stood beside Quinn, repeating her vows, she thought about how different this was from her first wedding. Then, she had been young and naive, believing she was marrying for love when really she was being married for money and connections. Now, she was older and wiser, and she knew exactly what she was choosing. She was choosing Quinn with his quiet strength and his gentle heart. She was choosing love, real love, the kind that was built on respect and trust and genuine caring. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife and Quinn kissed her, Helena felt a joy so profound it brought tears to her eyes. She was Mrs. Helena Dalton now, married to a good man who loved her, free from her past and ready for her future. The celebration after the wedding was held at the Circle J, and it seemed like half the county turned out to wish them well. There was food and music and dancing, and Helena laughed more than she had in her entire life. She danced with Quinn, with Margaret, with all the ranch hands, feeling light and free and absolutely, completely happy. As the evening wore on and the guests began to leave, Quinn took Helena's hand and led her to the small house on the edge of the ranch property. It was a simple 2-room cabin that had been empty since the previous foreman had left, but Quinn and some of the other men had spent the past few weeks fixing it up, making it livable. "Welcome home, Mrs. Dalton," Quinn said, lifting her over the threshold. Helena looked around at the clean floors, the fresh curtains on the windows, the simple but sturdy furniture. It was not much, but it was theirs, a place where they could start their life together. "It's perfect," she said, and meant it. That night, as Helena lay in Quinn's arms in their marriage bed, she thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had been broken and discarded, left to die on a dusty road. But she had survived, and she had found love in the last place she expected it. She had found Quinn, and in finding him she had found herself again. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too, Quinn murmured back, his arms tightening around her. Forever. The years that followed were not without their challenges. Ranch life was hard, and there were droughts and harsh winters, sick cattle and broken fences, all the thousand difficulties that came with trying to make a living from the land. But Helena and Quinn faced it all together, supporting each other through the hard times, celebrating the good times, building a life one day at a time. A year after their wedding, Helena gave birth to their first child, a son they named Jacob. Quinn wept when he held his son for the first time, and Helena fell in love with him all over again, seeing the tenderness with which he handled the tiny baby. Jacob was followed 2 years later by a daughter they named Sarah, and then 2 years after that by another son they named Michael. The little cabin became crowded, and Quinn, with help from the other ranch hands, built an addition, giving them more room for their growing family. Helena discovered that she loved being a mother, loved the chaos and joy that came with children. She taught them to read and write, to sing and laugh, to be kind and brave. And Quinn was a wonderful father, patient and playful, always ready with a story or a game, teaching the boys to ride and rope, teaching Sarah to be strong and independent. Margaret became like a grandmother to the children, spoiling them shamelessly and declaring that the ranch had never been livelier or happier. The other ranch hands became uncles of sorts, teaching the children various skills, slipping them treats, teasing them gently. Helena never forgot where she had come from, never forgot that cold morning when Thomas had pushed her from the wagon. But instead of being a source of pain, the memory became a reminder of how far she had come, how much she had survived. She was strong, she was loved, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. One evening when Jacob was 10, Sarah was 8, and Michael was 6, the family sat on the porch of their now expanded home, watching the sunset. Jacob was showing Michael how to carve a piece of wood, carefully supervised by Quinn. Sarah sat beside Helena, learning to embroider a handkerchief. "Mama," Sarah said suddenly, "do you think we'll always be this happy?" Helena looked at her daughter, at this bright, confident girl who had never known fear or violence, who had grown up surrounded by love and security. "I think happiness is something you have to work at every day," Helena said carefully. "Life will bring challenges, and there will be hard times. But if you surround yourself with people who love you, if you choose kindness and courage, then yes, I think you can be happy." "Are you happy, Mama?" Sarah asked. Helena looked at Quinn, who had glanced over at her question, his eyes warm with love. She looked at her 3 beautiful children, at the home they had built together, at the life they had created. "Yes," she said simply. "I am very, very happy." That night, after the children were in bed, Helena and Quinn sat together on the porch as they had so many times before. The stars were brilliant overhead, and a cool breeze brought relief from the day's heat. "Do you ever think about that day?" Quinn asked quietly. "The day I found you on the road." "Sometimes," Helena admitted. "Not as much as I used to. Mostly I think about everything that came after. How you saved me, not just that day, but every day since. How you gave me a reason to live again, to hope again." "You saved yourself," Quinn said. "I just gave you a safe place to do it. You're the strongest person I know, Helena." "We saved each other," Helena said, taking his hand. "You needed to redeem yourself for not saving your sister, and I needed someone who would see me as more than just a burden or a possession. We were both broken in our own ways, and we healed each other." Quinn brought her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles gently. "Best thing I ever did was ride down that road at that exact moment. Best thing that ever happened to me was being found by you," Helena agreed. "Strange to think that the worst day of my life led to the best years of my life." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined, Two people who had found each other when they both needed it most. The past was behind them, painful but survivable, and the future stretched ahead, full of promise and possibility. As the years continued to pass, Helena and Quinn's family grew in other ways. Jacob grew into a strong young man who loved the ranch life and eventually took over managing much of the daily operations, working closely with his father. Sarah became a teacher, opening a small school for the ranch children and the children from neighboring spreads, her mother's love of learning passed down to a new generation. Michael discovered a talent for working with horses, becoming known throughout the county as someone who could gentle even the most difficult mount. Helena and Quinn grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. The passion of their early days mellowed into something even more profound. A partnership built on decades of shared experiences, mutual respect, and unwavering commitment. When Margaret passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 73, Helena mourned the woman who had given her a second chance at life. They buried her on a hill overlooking the ranch she had loved, and Helena made sure fresh flowers were placed on her grave every week. Helena and Quinn eventually inherited the Circle J, as Margaret had always intended, and they ran it together for many years. They saw their children marry and have children of their own, and their little house was often filled with the sounds of grandchildren playing and laughing. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Quinn gave Helena a beautiful locket with a tiny photograph of the two of them inside. "So you'll always have me close to your heart," he said. Helena wore it every day, this tangible symbol of the love they shared. Sometimes she would touch it and remember that terrified woman on the dusty road. Remember the kind cowboy who had stopped to help her. Remember the journey that had brought them to this place of contentment and joy. One spring evening, when they were both in their 60s, Helena and Quinn sat on their porch watching yet another sunset. They had watched thousands of them together by now, each one beautiful, each one precious. "Quinn," Helena said softly, "thank you." "For what?" he asked, his hand finding hers automatically, the gesture so familiar after all these years. "For everything. For finding me. For loving me. For giving me this life. I never thought I could be this happy, this at peace. You gave me that." Quinn turned to face her, and she could see the love in his gray eyes, now framed by laugh lines and crow's feet. "You gave me just as much, Helena. You gave me purpose and family and love. You made me believe in goodness again after I lost my sister. You were worth every moment, every hardship, every challenge. I would do it all again in a heartbeat." They kissed, this couple who had weathered so much together, who had built something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. And as the sun set on another day, painting the Texas sky in shades of gold and crimson, Helena knew with absolute certainty that she had found her happy ending. She had been pushed from a wagon and left to die, but instead she had been saved. She had been saved by a good man with a kind heart, a man who had taken her in the other direction, away from pain and toward love, and that had made all the difference. Years later, when Helena was 70 and Quinn was 78, they sat in the same spot, watching the same view, still holding hands. Their children were grown with children of their own. Jacob ran the ranch now, with his own sons learning the trade. Sarah's school had expanded into a proper building, and she was training younger teachers to carry on her work. Michael had a thriving business breeding and training horses, his reputation spreading far beyond their county. "We did well, didn't we?" Quinn said one evening, his voice slower now but still warm. "We did very well," Helena agreed. "We built something that will last beyond us. We created a family rooted in love and respect. We survived and thrived. Yes, my love, we did very well indeed." Quinn passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later at the age of 80. Helena held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke, she was grateful that he had gone peacefully, that he had lived a long and happy life, that they had had so many years together. She buried him next to Margaret on the hill overlooking the ranch, and she visited his grave every day, telling him about their children and grandchildren, about the ranch news, about how much she missed him but how grateful she was for every moment they had shared. Helena lived for another 5 years, surrounded by family, loved and respected by everyone who knew her. She told her grandchildren stories about their grandfather, about the day he had found her on the road and changed her life forever. She made sure they understood that love was not about grand gestures, but about showing up every day, about choosing kindness and commitment, about being there for each other through good times and bad. When Helena passed away at the age of 77, it was in her sleep, in the home she and Quinn had built together, surrounded by photographs of their family and memories of a life well lived. Her children buried her next to Quinn, reuniting them in death as they had been in life. On her headstone, below her name and dates, Jacob had inscribed a simple phrase: "She was loved and she loved in return. That was enough." And it was enough, more than enough. Because Helena Emerson, who became Helena Edwards and then Helena Dalton, had learned the most important lesson of all, that even when you are broken and discarded, even when you are pushed away and left behind, you can find your way to love and happiness. You can heal. You can start over. You can build something beautiful from the ruins of what was. All it takes is courage, hope, and maybe a kind cowboy riding down a dusty road at exactly the right moment, ready to take you in the other direction toward everything you never knew you needed. The Circle J Ranch continued for generations, passed down through Helena and Quinn's descendants, each generation hearing the story of how it all began. The story of a woman who survived the unthinkable and a man who stopped to help when he could have ridden past. The story of love found in the most unlikely circumstances, of healing and hope and second chances. And every time the story was told in every generation, it ended the same way, with Helena and Quinn sitting on their porch, hands intertwined, watching the sunset over the Texas plains they both loved, grateful for every moment they had together, every challenge they had overcome, every joy they had shared. It was a love story forged in adversity and tempered by time. It was a testament to the power of kindness, the strength of commitment, and the healing nature of true love. And it was a reminder that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are simply the beginning of something better, something beautiful, something worth every hardship it took to get there. Helena and Quinn's love story became legend in that part of Texas, told and retold, inspiring others to believe in second chances and the possibility of happiness even after the darkest times. Their great-great-grandchildren still lived on the Circle J Ranch, still worked the land, still watched the same sunsets, still believed in the kind of love their ancestors had shared. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the wind was just right, people swore they could feel the presence of Helena and Quinn still there, still watching over the ranch they had built together, still holding hands, still in love even beyond death. That was the legacy they left behind. Not just land and livestock, not just a successful ranch, but the knowledge that love, real love, the kind that saves you and sustains you and makes life worth living, is possible. Even in the Wild West of 1873, even on a dusty road in the middle of nowhere, even when everything seems lost, love can find you. All you have to do is be brave enough to accept it when it comes, to trust again when trust seems impossible, to hope again when hope seems foolish. Helena had done that. She had been brave and trusting and hopeful, and she had been rewarded with a lifetime of love and happiness. And Quinn, who had stopped that day on the road, who had chosen compassion over convenience, who had given a broken woman a second chance, had been rewarded with a love that exceeded his wildest dreams, a family that brought him joy every day, and the knowledge that he had honored his sister's memory in the best way possible by saving someone else. Their story was complete, their ending happy, their love eternal. And as the sun set one final time on this telling of their tale, the message was clear. Love wins. Kindness matters. Second chances are real. And sometimes, being pushed in one direction is simply life's way of sending you toward something better in another. Helena and Quinn Dalton had lived that truth, had embodied it, had proven it with their lives. And that was the greatest legacy of all.